You never expect trouble to show up at your front door, smiling like it belongs there. But that's exactly what happened. I opened the door and there he was. Jalen. My stepson's best friend. Only, he wasn't a boy anymore. He had shoulders now. A voice that vibrated when he spoke. Eyes that didn't flinch when they met mine. It was a surprise visit. He was home from college, just for a few weeks. I gave him the same smile I gave all my son's friends. Polite. Warm. Detached. But when he said, "Hey, Mrs. Ellison," there was something different about the way he said it. Something that made my stomach flip. I told myself not to think about it. Not to notice the way he filled the doorway. How his shirt stretched slightly across his chest. How he leaned, hands in pockets, like he was used to being stared at. I was 47. He was 21. That should have been enough to silence every thought. But the problem is, I hadn't felt noticed in years. Not like that. My husband, Mark, barely looked up from his phone when I told him Jalen stopped by. My stepson, Tyler, was thrilled. They had plans to hang out all week. And just like that, Jalen was in and out of my house, every day. Leaving a trail of awareness in his wake. He smiled at me a little longer than he should have. Called me ma'am, but with a grin that said he didn't mean it. It was innocent, at first. But some part of me, a quiet, restless part one thought had died years ago, woke up. And every time I heard the doorbell ring after that, I hoped it was him. At first, I told myself I was being polite. I was just being a good host. It's what mothers do, right? Offer drinks. Snacks. Ask how school's going. But the truth was messy, eh? And much harder to admit. I kept looking for him. Kept lingering longer than necessary when I knew he'd be in the room. Kept dressing just a little nicer when I knew he might drop by. And he noticed. One afternoon, they were playing basketball out back. It was hot, one of those heavy summer days where sweat clings to skin. I brought out lemonade, thinking I'd leave it by the porch and go. But Jalen called out, "You're a lifesaver, Mrs. Ellison." And then he smiled. A slow, knowing kind of smile that didn't belong on a kid. He poured his drink, but his eyes never left mine. "Always looking out for us," he said. There was a flicker in his tone. A slight pause after the word us. It made my chest tighten. I laughed it off. Turned away faster than I should have. But the heat in my cheeks wasn't from the sun. From that day on, I found excuses. "Oh, can one of you help carry these boxes? I need someone tall to reach the top shelf in the garage. I'm working in the garden if you guys want fresh tomatoes." It was always him who offered to help. Always him who lingered behind just a little too long. And when he stood near me, I noticed everything. The way his shirt clung to the small of his back when he leaned over. The low rasp in his voice when he was out of breath. The way his eyes scanned me, quickly, but deliberately, like he was memorizing. My husband never noticed. Tyler didn't either. But I did. And more dangerously, so did Jalen. I wasn't afraid of getting caught. Not yet. Because at that point, nothing had happened. Not really. But something was building. And every time he looked at me like he already knew what I needed, I let it. It was late. The kind of late where the house goes quiet, and every sound feels louder. Mark had fallen asleep on the couch again. The TV was still playing some crime show, volume low, lights off. Tyler and his friends had gone out. They were supposed to be gone all night. But then I heard the front door click. I stepped out of the bedroom, pulling my robe tighter. And there he was. Jalen. Alone. He looked surprised to see me at first. Then something else passed between us. A flicker. Recognition, maybe. Desire, definitely. I forgot my charger, he said, holding it up like proof. His voice was soft, deep, and closer than it needed to be. I nodded, but I couldn't seem to make my feet move. Neither could he. The kitchen light was the only thing glowing in the house. I stepped in to grab a glass of water. More for something to do than thirst. He followed. Silently. And stood at the counter, just watching me. "You always up this late?" he asked. His voice wasn't playful. It wasn't teasing. It was deliberate. I turned, slowly. "I guess I don't sleep much anymore," I answered. And it was the truth. How could I? When my body had been quiet for years, and suddenly it was buzzing. He stepped closer. One slow movement. Then another. I should have backed up. I should have said something. But I didn't. Because when he looked at me, he didn't see a woman nearing 50. He saw me. And in that second, I forgot who I was supposed to be. He brushed my wrist with his fingers. Featherlight. Testing. I didn't pull away. "Your robe's slipping," he whispered. And his voice, God, his voice did something to me. Still, nothing happened. No kiss. No touch that would cross the line. Not yet. But when he left, the air was different. The kitchen still smelled like him. And I knew. I had already crossed the line. Because I didn't want to stop it. I wanted more. It didn't happen in the bedroom. Or behind closed doors. It happened in the kitchen. Mid-morning. With sunlight pouring through the window like nothing was wrong. I was making coffee. Wearing that thin robe again, maybe on purpose, maybe not. The boys were asleep. Mark had left early for work. I didn't even hear Jalen come in. But suddenly, he was behind me. Close. "Smells good," he said. I turned slightly, and he wasn't looking at the coffee. His eyes were on me, on my bare shoulder where the robe had slipped again. Always that robe. "Want some?" I asked, trying to sound casual. But my voice wavered. He noticed. Of course he did. He didn't answer. Just stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his chest against my back. His hand reached around me slowly. Not aggressive. Not fast. Just curious. Confident. He placed it on my hip, steadying me as if I were about to fall. Maybe I was. "Tell me to stop," he said. Right against my ear. His breath was hot. And suddenly my knees didn't feel strong. I should have. God, I should have. But instead, I leaned back. Just enough. Just enough to let him know he could. His other hand slid up my arm. Lightly. Until his fingers found the strap of my robe. He pushed it aside. Deliberate. Hungry. But patient. I closed my eyes. There was nothing rushed about it. Nothing sloppy. It was slow. Intentional. Like he'd imagined this 100 times. And now he was memorizing every second. He kissed the back of my neck. And I swear, I stopped breathing. For the first time in years, I felt wanted. Not out of obligation. Not out of routine. But raw, pulsing need. When he finally stepped back, I didn't say a word. Couldn't. He didn't apologize. He didn't have to. We both knew something irreversible had happened. And from that moment forward, I belonged to it. To him. Even if the world never knew. After that morning, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Everything else faded. Chores, dinner, errands, they were just noise. He'd walk into a room and it was like the air shifted. Like my skin knew he was near before my eyes even found him. And when they did, that look. That slow, steady look that felt like undressing without moving a finger. He didn't touch me again. Not right away. But that almost made it worse. Because now I knew what his hands felt like. What his mouth tasted like on my skin. And I craved it. Like something inside me had been awakened, and it didn't want to sleep again. I became reckless. Subtle, but still reckless. Lingering at the breakfast table in thinner shirts. Leaning a little too close when we talked. Brushing past him in the hallway just to feel the tension snap between us. And the way he looked at me. It was never quick. Never shy. He looked at me like I was his. Like he already knew how I'd sound in his arms. How I'd fall apart underneath him. I started waking up early just to see him before the others stirred. I put on perfume I hadn't touched in years. Tried on lipstick again, just for mornings when he was near. And he noticed. Every little change. Every silent invitation. And he answered them with glances, with smirks. With the kind of patience that made it impossible to think about anything else. Mark didn't see. Tyler didn't either. They moved around the house like everything was normal. But I was burning. I'd lie awake at night, remembering the way Jalen's hand had settled on my hip. The way his breath had felt on my ear. Replay it all. Over and over. Until I ached with it. He hadn't kissed me again. Hadn't touched me. But it didn't matter. Because the hunger was already there. And it had nothing to do with sex. It was about how he saw me. And how I couldn't stop needing it. I told myself I could control it. That I could keep this quiet, secret, harmless. But obsession doesn't stay small. It grows. It spreads. And then it explodes. It was a Sunday. Mark and Tyler had gone out to run errands. Jalen was still upstairs, supposedly sleeping in. I was in the laundry room, folding, sorting, trying to distract myself. I didn't hear him come down. I didn't need to. I felt him. He didn't say a word. Just walked in, shut the door behind him. And looked at me like he'd been starving. I thought you were sleeping, I whispered. He stepped closer. I couldn't, he said. I kept thinking about you. I didn't move. Not away, not toward him. I just stood there, trembling. Because part of me wanted this. And the other part already knew we were standing on the edge of something irreversible. He came up behind me. His hands gripped my hips. Firm. Possessive. Like he'd been holding back for too long. He pressed into me, his breath hot at the base of my neck. I let out a shaky sound, half moan, half warning. But I didn't stop him. His lips grazed my ear. Tell me to leave, he said. I didn't. I couldn't. Then, just as his mouth touched my neck. Mom? Tyler's voice. We froze. Panic clutched my spine. Jalen pulled away fast, slipped into the hallway like nothing had happened. I spun, heart hammering, adjusting my blouse like a guilty teenager. Tyler walked in with a basket of wet towels. Forgot these in the washer last night, he said casually. No suspicion in his voice. But his eyes lingered. He looked at me. Then at the hallway where Jalen had just vanished. And for the first time, I wondered if he knew. I smiled too quickly. Said something about being distracted. But the damage was done. It wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a risk. One that was getting harder and harder to hide. He's gone again. Back to school. Back to whatever life he lives when he's not in my house. Not in my arms. And I'm still here. Still married. Still pretending. Mark hasn't noticed a thing. He kisses me goodnight like always, routine, mechanical. As if nothing in this house has changed. As if I haven't changed. But I have. Because when Jalen left, he didn't just take his things. He took pieces of me I didn't even know were missing. Now, everything feels numb again. Quiet. Flat. I scroll through my phone just to stare at his name. No new messages. Just the last one. Wish I could have stayed longer. I read it over and over. Wondering if he meant it. Wondering if he's thinking about me, the way I still think about him. It wasn't just the thrill. It wasn't even the secrecy. It was how he saw me. Like I was still beautiful. Still worthy of desire. Still alive. And now, nothing compares. Not Mark's touch. Not routine dinners. Not quiet nights on the couch. Because Jalen taught me what I'd buried for so long. That I was more than a mother. More than a wife. More than a habit someone grew used to. I miss his stare. That low voice in my ear. The way he made me feel like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. And I hate myself for it. But I also crave it. Every single day. Because when you've been invisible for too long, and someone suddenly looks at you like you're made of light, you'll do anything to feel that way again. Even if it's wrong. Even if it burns everything else down. Even if he's your stepson's best friend. I don't know what comes next. Maybe this ends. Maybe it doesn't. But I do know one thing. He wasn't supposed to be mine. But in those stolen moments, he was. And the worst part is, I don't want to let him go. Not really. Not ever.